Welcome to Global Shift, where we track the global transition away from the neoliberal world disorder towards a new emerging planetary order and help to unpack and make sense of the latest news and geopolitical events. This is an announcement to say that a new article has been posted on the Global Shift website yesterday, the 29th of April. The article covers a variety of things: the Iranian missile attack on Israel and its effects, the student protests in the United States over the issue of Palestine, the new Ukraine aid bill with its large chunk of money for Israel, and how the new diplomacy in the Gulf region endured the ravages of the current war, and what all this means for the US presidential elections, with commentary more generally on the slow motion, or perhaps the not slow motion, collapse of empire. I suppose it was only a matter of time before the unhinged Netanyahu Israeli regime did something completely stupid, and I mean stupid in terms even of its own interests. It did actually two really stupid things. Firstly, it killed British, American, Australian and Polish personnel, 7 people in all, working for the World Central Kitchen, a humanitarian organization close to the US Congress, and in doing so turned the mood in the Western capitals against itself. Given that this attack was clearly a planned surgical strike, Netanyahu's claim that it was unintentional just made things worse. The second really stupid thing was that it bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing everybody in it, including civilians who lived in the flat above. This led Iran to decide finally to take action. It had had enough after decades of such provocations. Iran's response completely changed the rules of the game in the region, with what turned out to be a militarily and strategically highly successful drone and missile attack on Israel. An attack that Israel's allies collectively had had to defend against on behalf of their ally. This they could only do actually because Iran had given them plenty of warning. The situation is now that Iran has drawn new red lines in regard to its interests in the region. The era of Israel's adolescent joyriding seems to be over. Iran, furthermore, demonstrated a considerable and highly developed military capability. And this is in addition to the fact that the current war has already demonstrated the asymmetric power that it wields in the region through the various alliances that make up the axis of resistance. In the last but one article posted on this site, there was a discussion of the challenge posed to Pentagon Capitalism's hegemonic supremacy that came about as a result of what was called a new democratization of war. This democratization essentially involves the spread of new war management techniques that have come with digitization and the development of sophisticated drone and missile technology. And all of this, Middle East resistance and liberation forces have managed to gain supreme mastery of. In fact, with this last Iranian missile attack on Israel, we see how these advances extend also to the use by Iran of hypersonic technology, a technology that NATO and the US still does not possess. The current article, however, turns to address a different challenge that has arisen to Pentagon capitalism, that which has come from the spread in the United States of student protests in support of a Gaza ceasefire, as well as in support of divestment from Israel. The New York Times has compared these popular movements among the country's student population to the Vietnam protests. But on this occasion, we're not dealing with American soldiers returning home from the battlefield in body bags, but with Gaza civilians being massacred and starved to death on live feeds in social media. This is complicating the presidential elections and risks turning the August Democratic National Congress in Chicago into a massive protest fest, along with all the accompanying violence that the national security state will undoubtedly mete out on protesters. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Blinken visited Saudi Arabia yesterday. In his diatribe to the World Economic Forum conference in Riyadh, he demonstrated the current US administration's total incapacity, or perhaps its unwillingness, to comprehend even the bare outlines of the changes that have taken place in the Middle East since the Saudi-Iran peace deal of March 2023. This peace deal gave birth to what this side has called the new diplomacy, a rapprochement between the regional powers in the Middle East that has actually strengthened rather than weakened through the current period of hostilities. Unbelievably, Blinken called for an Arab NATO yesterday to confront Iran. This idea failed even before the Saudi-Iran peace deal, when it was mooted 2 years ago. Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al-Thani's reply to Blinken about the need for Palestinian statehood actually implied that the problem was not Iran, but Israel, together with the fact that America is totally incapable of controlling its ally. Blinken's subsequent promise to address the Palestinian state question was simply an insult to his audience's intelligence. The US had only just blocked Palestine's full membership of the United Nations. And everybody knows that the Israeli Knesset recently rejected any notion of Palestinian statehood. So Blinken's visit to Saudi Arabia is less of a policy-driven diplomatic offensive and more of an exercise in the pseudo-diplomacy of distraction that comes out of the fact that the Biden administration has lost total control over events in the Middle East. It is Blinken's 6th trip to the region since October 2023. In his first, he had tried to convince Arab leaders to host ethnically cleansed hordes of Gazans that were to be displaced by Israeli forces. He lost his Arab audience back then. On this occasion, his idea of an Arab NATO saw his audience's eyes simply glaze over. He not only ignored the fact that Iran's attack on Israel was legally justified, but more importantly, that it was successful. And this despite the US, the UK and France providing cover for Israel. Anyway, the current article deals with all this and lots more. Please send any comments and questions on the issues contained in any of the articles on the website to info@globalshift.com. We'd love to hear from you and discuss these issues. Thank you very much for listening.